there are people that try as best they can to live up to their name, but somehow along the way, it just doesn't work because time marches on. And with that, happy early birthday, Hanoch Young, who's getting older.
Well, normally I would say thank you very much, Mike. That's very kind. However, it's not just me, but all birthdays in 2020 have been suspended. Since the entire year is a giant wasteroo for most of the people on the planet. But in any case, I'll be honest with you. Let me level right down to anyone who's listening. It's not that big a deal. It's not that big a birthday. I've been 39 several times already. But thank you. Thank you for the good wishes.
And I know that it's kind of your desire that that Daniel's wife waits until Shabbat to have her baby. But if I told her that you're praying in that direction, she would probably come all the way from Franklin to Modain to slap you.
Slap me still. I have to tell you, I tried the same approach with dear friend Heather Amon. And, it's what can I tell you? People, I guess July 12th will just have to remain mine. That's all.
I guess.
I think it's also Bastille Day or something, but that's okay.
So anybody that's out there that would like to send Hanoch some birthday greetings, I'm sure he wouldn't mind that.
That's right.
All right, so Hanoch, of course, you guys are kind of being overrun now, and it's an interesting time. We see the numbers, whether those numbers are true, fake, made up, conspiracy, somewhere in the middle of all that above. It's causing some problems once again. I mean, it looked like the country of Israel and the United States was going to be opening up more, and now it's kind of collapsing on itself. How's that doing on your end?
Well, it's interesting because if you cover your ears and say, I can't hear you, la, 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 it doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yeah.
And our prime minister, who again remains focused strictly on somehow getting immunity so he doesn't wind up going to jail when he's convicted, really, remember, we got this bizarro unity government after 3 elections that was supposed to be because of the emergency of COVID-19.
Yeah.
They're just not doing anything about it.
And
so all of a sudden, the infection, because again, at the beginning of May, Netanyahu himself said, go out and have a coffee, go out and have a beer. Heck, have a coffee and a beer. Enjoy yourselves. And Israelis went and did.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the numbers of infections are skyrocketing because Israelis are used to emergencies, but they're then used to, once the emergency is over, to, go back to regular life.
Yeah.
And the government didn't take it seriously, and the populace didn't take it seriously.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, I speculate, I wonder if, we saw that there was going to be, Israel was doing good for a little while. There was talk about at least, and you and I have our own feelings about the annexation and how that would be detrimental, but at least it was a step in saying that, we agree with the scripture that is our land. It's interesting that as that thought began to wane, and well, let's just put it off, that all of a sudden the virus goes up. Is it, am I really going out on a limb here saying that there's some possibilities that obedience to the scripture would cause blessing and non-obedience to the scripture would cause like a curse or a plague?
Well, gee, let me think about that.
But the reality that you could think about, like, maybe in Deuteronomy or something.
Please don't confuse the issue with facts.
Okay.
the bottom line is, to this day, my government has not created a single map for a single option which they've been able to turn over to the army, the police, the security forces. So no one at this end was really serious about it. Certainly at the American end, I think Jared Kushner, who right now is doing the moonwalk backwards on this whole thing, I think it was a ploy to get the so-called Palestinian Authority, the PLO, the group of terrorists out of Ramallah, to negotiate. It's because, again, the whole premise behind the current American administration is everything can be treated like a real estate deal.
Yeah.
I bluff, you bluff, and
Yeah. Well, the concept of the PLO negotiating, that's gone so well in the past that maybe
right.
if you just put another person in there to do it, it would really work better the next time.
That's right. It wasn't the fault of Secretary of State Rogers a zillion years ago. It wasn't the fault of Secretary of State John Kerry, when he was around. So, let's give it to the president's son-in-law,
Yeah. Didn't work. Okay, let's talk about something that's actually relevant.
Yes.
Okay. So as you know, I was at Revive Conference in Franklin, Tennessee this past weekend.
You traveled all the way from Franklin to Franklin.
Interesting enough, I went from Franklin to Franklin, and my first workshop was in the Franklin room.
I got to tell you,
yeah,
you need to be saving more Benjamin Franklins. That's what that means.
Okay, now you got, okay. I kid you not, in the bathroom, and I'll have to get the pic and show it to you sometime. I'll send it to you, but I don't know if people can see this real well on the camera, but this is a painting that was in my bathroom, and it was in other people's bathrooms too. Now, doesn't that kind of, I think that's Franklin, but doesn't that look like a COVID-19 image right there? It's like, so I put a towel over that because I wasn't about to see it the whole time. It was just, yeah, it was like beyond freaky. But a lot of us started talking about that. But so I did a message in the general session on the words of Matthew, your kingdom come, and based upon walking toward the kingdom, based upon the definition of the word home. And I truly believe that this is something that goes across. You talk about the American Jews today. What is the problem with the American Jews is that they have failed to define what the word home means. And that's something that is true on this side of the family also. Your thoughts? I see it rolling there.
Okay, I actually think that they have defined home. We, who would love to see them come on Aliyah, come to Israel, are having trouble accepting that kind of bone in the throat. People in this movement, some of whom would really love to live in Israel. I say some, not all.
Yeah.
Because you hear it often, but like, if you're not learning Hebrew and if you're not preparing a career where you could actually work here, how serious is that thought? Okay, let put that aside. They can't understand why American Jews don't become Israeli Jews, because they are Americans who by accident of birth happen to be Jewish. as painful as it is for all of us to accept that, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And even in the Orthodox community, those who send their children to study in Israel, who speak Hebrew, who will say L'Shana Haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, they mean as a visit.
Yeah.
They don't really, it's like, you brought up an interesting thing. I listened to your presentation at Revive when Shabbat was over here, and you mentioned how 80% of the Jews in Babylon didn't return.
Yeah.
It's because they opened up falafel shops, and they opened up all these, wonderful, wonderful things. And, they were firm supporters of making Babylon great again.
Yeah.
And this idea, after only 70 years of returning to the land of Israel, the land of promise, the land chosen by God, that he would rest his presence on earth, they shrugged. Thanks, but no thanks.
Well, when exile becomes home, that's the point of confusion in one's mind. And
Right.
so without that redefinition. So I had the amazing privilege this week of spending some time with some of the young adults. And I normally don't hang out with adults, regular adults, because most adults are boring. So I was able to hang out with a pretty good group, a really fascinating group of young adults that I have so much respect for. And after Revive, one of the posts was regarding the teaching that I did, and was about, okay, how can I become kingdom-minded in my walk? So, we've talked over and over again about, learn Hebrew and get a career that could be, kind of multinational kind of thing. Giving unto Israel, of course, planning a tour to Israel, those kind of things. But what about just kind of the practical day by day things of life? Do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, actually, I have a lot about it because I've been, shouting far wide, and people smile, they nod, but because of that instantaneous gratification, they kind of walk away and they shrug, and the idea just slips out of their head. Each and every one of us needs to become knowledgeable and fully committed. What does that mean? People speak about Israel, and I mean either biblical Israel, the Jewish people, or the modern state of Israel, and they know next to nothing. And they make pronouncements about things, and I'll give you one example, and it's a digression, so pull me back if I travel down the rabbit hole too far. I get forwarded a video 2 weeks ago. This guy is all excited, the twin princes of Israel. He keeps insisting that the current government is a fulfillment of prophecy because we have a two-headed government. I explained to him we don't, but he insists that we do. Okay. That we're fulfilling a prophecy of Hosea by moving a boundary, by incorporating the 30% sovereignty that Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, has deemed in his plan as of January to, for Israel to have sovereign territory. I explained to him, we don't have a two-headed government, we don't have twin princes, and it's not going to happen. So his response was, well, Israeli politics is too confusing for me. So I said, okay, I get that. I wanted to say, then why don't you listen to me when I describe to you what's actually happening? But I jumped to the main point and I said, but you made a video stating that this is a fact and it has to do with biblical prophecy. Are you now going to come up with another video that states that you were totally off base?
Hmm.
No response.
Yeah.
So you need to become educated. Now people say, well, I don't know where to start. Well, you know what? You know my website, kolyehuda.com, KOLYEHUDA.com. Send me a note saying, Hanoch, where do I get a book on Israeli history? How do I know that this article, what news sources in English do you use? That's a big thing. The
Hmm.
other thing is, particularly for the younger people who are just starting out with their professions and careers and jobs, you still are responsible for tithing. You still are responsible for contributing. But you know what? You can multiply what you give by soliciting family members, by saying, you know what? I'm giving $2 a week towards whatever it might be. American Friends of Itamar, the Jewish community in Shomron, in Samaria. And when there's, a family barbecue or picnic, walk around with a little jar and go to, Uncle Bubba, and Aunt, whatever, and, Mima and Pawpaw and all the other, I love these names. And really, you need to become, I hate to use the term social organizer because that is a whole different meaning in America now, but you need to become the local address for Israel advocacy. You need to become the one-stop shop for understanding what's going on in Israel. You need to become educated. You need to raise your game. And it wouldn't hurt these folks if when times are a little better, they reached out to you, Mike, and they said, Mike, could you come over, come over to our community, next month on Shabbat and teach us.
Mm-hmm.
It's really time, and we'll quote our dear friend and brother, David Altman, it's time for people to put some skin in the game.
Yeah.
And if they can't get on a plane, people say, well, I don't have $1,000 airfare. Well, keep saving because there aren't planes that are coming. But you know what? Do y'all have a passport yet?
Yeah.
Not a bad idea to get one. There are so many practical things. Have you ever looked at a map of Israel? Even the biblical maps in the back of, right, in the New Testament, there's always a biblical. I mean, are you aware of it?
Yeah, little things. It seems like
Little thing.
a lot of what you're saying is little things, but in the end, little things become big things.
The other thing is, I'm going to quote something that I just put up on Facebook a few hours ago. And I attributed it to you because I heard it from you. And it said, build your ark, don't pray for the rain to stop.
Yeah.
It's time for people, and you know what? Building an ark, Noah didn't start with half the frame. Each little piece of that gopher wood, he had to put together. He had to do it. Each step in remaking yourself as a real, and it's to become a Dorshei Tzion, a seeker, a yearner for Zion.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone has a local Jewish community near them. As we say in Hebrew, Gamzula Tova, this is also for the best. American Jews are a whole different species than we are here in Israel.
Yeah.
But reach out to me. Lately I've started getting emails from people asking me questions, and we're setting up times for me to call them and have conversations. I don't have all the answers, but I will help direct you towards them.
Yeah. We talk about that, and we're running out of time here. You talk about the building the ark. And yeah, that's a quote that I've used for many, many years. Putting, okay, how do you do that? What's the structure? Well, the ark began with a blueprint. So, it's not a big thing in maybe it's not a big thing in our minds to buy an Israel map and put it on your wall. Maybe it's not a big thing to get an Israeli flag and put it behind your desk, or like I have one on my wall ahead of me and my Jerusalem flag, and my house. Everywhere you look is Udi Marotz, the artist, or or something is here. But maybe
Part
those
of why
uh,
I'm so with y'all.
maybe most of those things don't feel big in our minds, but maybe that is the big step. Maybe that is the beginning of stepping toward. Okay, and so those are some things that we can do. Reaching out
Absolutely.
to you. If and let me ask you this one question. I didn't ask you this prior to, so it may be a difficult one. If I were to, let's say that I don't know much about Israel yet. If I was to go and get one book besides the scripture, okay, I mean, that would be the number one. If I was to get one book regarding Israel as a land and people, what would you suggest?
You mean prior to the publication of one of the two books that I'm working on?
Well, yeah.
I
I
guess
mean,
you meant that. Yeah.
we're all holding our breath, for those two, but yes.
Okay. I'm actually going to have to say, tune in for our next broadcast next week, and I'll do a little show and tell, because it's there isn't one single book, sadly. Each cover a little bit, with the caveat that, again, remember, history is truly his story.
Yeah.
So whoever is writing it, it's colored with that perception. But I'll be more than happy to share my kind of shorten the learning curve for folks.
Okay. Hey, we'll look forward to that. Make sure you remind me that we're doing that, because I've got a lot of different things I got to do between now and then. But
Show enough.
and I guess our last thing is prayers for Miss Batya Wooten in the loss of Angus recently. What a couple of pioneers. I messaged Batya on Sunday after I found this out, and I said I had thought about her so many times at Revive, because the message that I did on Friday had so much of Batya in it. There's no
Yeah.
way I could be the teacher that I am if it were not for Miss Batya Wooten. So our appreciation.
You know, I noticed in watching your message that around the stage area, they had the flags of all the tribes. And you were standing, right where the speaker was in front of the banner of the tribe of Judah.
Wow.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that it was only Batya and Angus Wooten that invited a traditionally believing Jewish brother who supported the restoration of Judah and Ephraim based on mutual respect, that would be me, in August of 2013. Never before and never since has any organization at a national conference like that invited a Jewish speaker, and here it is, surrounded with banners of all the tribes. But they should have a sign at the door: no Jews allowed.
There are conferences.
Was I subtle about that?
There are conferences that pretty much have that sign. It's just not really seen real well.
Yeah.
May that change. I mean, we can point out the problem, or we can work for the solution, and that's what you and I are doing here. So All right. Happy
Absolutely.
birthday.
Thanks.
Don't get too old. And you know, of course, you know that in Israel, you're never you don't come out of the womb at 0. You're actually 1. So whatever you are, you're actually a year older than that. And if you were in Korea, uh, everybody at the New Year has another birthday, so you'd actually be 2 years older than what you really think you are.
I really don't want to hear that.
I know. That's why I said it. Take care.
Mike, take care. Shalom, brother. Bye-bye.